The US has sent bombers to Japan in the first strong show of support for Tokyo as Japan battles Chinese coercion on all fronts. On Wednesday, 2 B52s flew with 3 Japanese F-35s and 3 F-15 fighters in drills over the Sea of Japan. They were a response to 15 Russian and Chinese bombers and other warplanes, which carried out an 8-hour patrol that covered the Sea of Japan and the East China Sea, breaching the air defense identification zones of both Japan and South Korea without prior warning. So let's take a look at the route. 2 Russian Tu-95s, shown in black, coming from the Sea of Japan down from the north, were joined by 2 Chinese H-6 bombers, shown in red, coming off the Chinese coast from the west. They synchronized their patrol around Japan's southern islands over the East China Sea and were joined en route by a further 8 Chinese J-15 fighters, shown here in yellow and orange, over the Miyako Strait. At the same time, 2 Russian Su-30s and an early warning plane remained in the north to support the flight. This is Tokyo's Chief Cabinet Secretary.
両国による度重なる爆撃機の共同飛行というのは、我が国周辺における活動の拡大、活発化を意味するとともに、我が国に対する恣意行動と捉えざるを得ない、まさに我が国の安全保障上重大な懸念というふうに考えます。
Beijing's now 4-week-long campaign against Tokyo began over a question Prime Minister Takaichi Sanae answered in the Diet on November 17th about potential scenarios under Japanese legislation that would drag Tokyo into any war over Taiwan. We ask what the US-Japan bomber flight and show of strength means for Beijing's ongoing intimidation campaign of Japan, and as China increases its disinformation about Japan's so-called militarism. We compare China today to Imperial Japan in the years leading up to World War II. Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Ian Kavat. To discuss this and more, I'm joined by Raymond Song, Prospect Foundation Vice President, also Gernot Lalari, Institute for National Defense and Security Research Visiting Scholar, and Michael Chen, Democratic Progressive Party Department of International Affairs Director. A very warm welcome to all of you on the show today.
Thanks.
This is footage released by the Russian Defense Ministry of its 2 nuclear-capable Tu-95 bombers joint patrol, which Russia's TASS agency said lasted a total of 8 hours, as it was joined by a further 13 other Russian and Chinese warplanes. Both Japan and South Korea scrambled jets to intercept the patrol as it flew through their air defense zones. Tokyo said the joint US-Japan flight on the following day, quote, reaffirms the strong will between Japan and US not to tolerate unilateral changes to the status quo by force. This also demonstrates the readiness of Japan's self-defense forces and US armed forces and further strengthens the deterrence and response capabilities of the Japan-US alliance. And earlier, in a reply to Japan Times, the US State Department criticized China for the first time for actions, quote, not conducive to regional peace and stability after Chinese jets used their weapons radar lock on 2 Japanese fighters for 30 minutes intermittently. Despite the unprecedented number of aircraft involved in the Chinese-Russian patrol, Beijing attempted to play it down with this. Watch.
我想再次强调的是，此次中俄联合空中战略巡航是年度合作计划的项目，展示了双方共同应对地区安全挑战、维护地区和平稳定的决心与能力。日方没必要大惊小怪、对号入座。
So, Gemmon, let me start with you first. Japan says serious national security concern. China says nothing to worry about. So is Japan making a fuss and jumping to conclusions?
No, not at all. I mean, imagine you're a non-nuclear country and 2 superpowers with their nuclear-armed bombers and their fighter aircraft fly off your coast. Japan has no nuclear weapons, so it is a serious national security concern. And it's also a challenge to the alliance of the US and Japan at a critical moment when things are really hot between Japan and China.
China says it's the 10th annual patrol. They're trying to make out that it's routine. Why was this different?
Well, it's not routine. The Russian and Chinese air forces did the same thing during the Quad meeting in 2022. It wasn't just a routine event.
Was this worse than 2022, though?
In 2022, it was the Quad meeting in Tokyo. This situation is worse because it's at a heightened state of tension between China and Japan. Clearly, this is not something that's a planned event that happens every year.
There was a lot more aircraft as well in this particular patrol. Raymond, in related news, Zelensky has talked about the increasing dependence of Putin, Russia on China. According to Reuters, he said the steps involve shifts by Russia to give up aspects of its sovereignty to Beijing. Now, what does this mean, and is this concerning for this region, Japan, Taiwan?
I think that indicates the depth and the scope of Russian-Chinese defense or military cooperation. The Zelensky says the intelligence from Ukraine indicated that the Russians seems to be willing to go further and deeper than before. And that might be encouraged to indicate to several aspects. The first one is that about the Russian reliance on Chinese, for example, provision of the dual-use goods, even for military machinery or even for lethal weapons, in order to win the war in Ukraine. For example, the transfer of military technology sensitive to the edge that the Russian army still has over the PLN, and maybe that Russia also gave that away. So which causes concern for the Indo-Pacific, that the Chinese is gaining edges from the Russians in order to aggravate the situation in the Pacific.
Michael, to the US bombers now. We know that China has also been testing the US, and it's resolved through this pressure on Japan. What message was the US sending by sending these two B52s? And what does it mean for China's ongoing coercion? Does it deter them?
Well, I think it's as Tokyo has stated, right? This is an action that is, showing that its US actions are meeting its words in terms of the commitment to the US-Japan alliance, which is a treaty alliance.
So what message or what conclusions does China draw from what it's seen so far and this B-52?
Yeah. Well, I think, honestly, I'm not sure that this alone, even though this is welcome news, will be enough to significantly alter China's calculations or their actions. I think we're going to see continued pressure from the Chinese side to continue to, hit the pressure points and to test U.S. resolve while punishing Japan,
right,
which is what they've been trying to do anyways.
Raymond, quickly, what do you believe is the next step for China?
I beg to differ, but for this episode, for this round, actually the U.S. is trying to say that enough is enough. So if the B-52 bomber is coming, then there should be closing down and stepping down the final touches to that.
Okay.
So it's also have these political calculations from the Japan and U.S. side behind.
Okay, let's hope that happens. China has used this route to repeatedly raise the spectre of Japan's militarism and atrocities around World War II. This is a recent article by China's ambassador to Australia, writing in The Australian, and the article is called A Warning on the Rise of Japanese Aggression. Once Japanese militarism revives, the ambassador says it would seek ruthless revenge, and the peoples of the Asia-Pacific would be the first to suffer. Meanwhile, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi told his visiting German counterpart that Japan was a military threat to China. And yet, for the past 7 decades, Japan has transformed into a liberal democracy and fulfilled its role as a peaceful and responsible member of the international community. So, since China has persistently revived memories of Japan in the 1920s and 30s, let's compare Imperial Japan with present-day China. Let's start with the rapid peacetime buildup of both, aimed at projecting power overseas. Imperial Japan in the 1920s to 1930s ordered huge naval programs, including an 8-8 battleship plan of a core fleet of 8 modern battleships and 8 modern battle cruisers, as well as a new carrier fleet, which were designed to challenge the US and UK. China, over the past 20 years, has been executing the largest peacetime naval buildup in modern-day history, adding blue water destroyers, carriers, nuclear submarines, and large amphibious ships, equivalent to more than a British Royal Navy every 4 years. Both have an ideology of grievance and destiny. Japan framed its expansion as correcting the unfair Versailles Order and liberating Asia from Western colonialism. China has a revenge narrative agenda to end its century of humiliation, to achieve national rejuvenation with Taiwan and the near seas at the core. Both have stamped out dissent, repressed civil liberties, and centralized power. Imperial Japan hollowed out civilian control. The army and navy effectively dictated policy. In China, the PLA is firmly under CCP control, and the CCP is single-handedly ruled by Xi Jinping, who has made personal loyalty to him paramount. Jima, let me ask you then. So firstly, let's just go back to Wang Yi's comments. How ironic are they?
Well, extremely ironic in multiple dimensions.
Yeah.
First dimension, he's talking to the Germans, which during World War II were the allies of Imperial Japan. That's the first irony. Telling Germany that Japan is a threat, which is moronic. Secondly,
so what you're saying is Germany is as much a threat that Japan is, if you go by the logic.
Right. But the other ironic part about it is whenever they talk about the century of humiliation, they fail to mention the 3 centuries of humiliation that China imposed on its neighbors during the Qing dynasty, which I find ironic. They took parts of what is Vietnam and Cambodia and parts of Mongolia and etc. I mean, they were expansive, and then just the thought that Wang Yi would say something so stupid to a German who knows that the Chinese military, the Chinese Communist military, has the largest fleet in the world. It's multiple levels of irony.
Michael, so I presented some of the similarities between Imperial Japan and modern-day China. So what do these similarities mean for our situation today in this region?
Well, I think it's always a bit tricky and risky to draw these, comparisons, because you don't want to risk accidentally kind of justifying what had happened in the past or rationalizing what's going on today with what China is doing. But we see that China is trying to build overwhelming capacity first, right? And its goal is to be able to use that to coerce its neighbors and and other players in the region, and try to change the status quo without fighting a war. I think that is their ideal scenario. That's what they try to do by coercing Taiwan, by coercing Japan. Another thing they do best is that kind of gaslighting that we just talked about, right? Just completely distorting history, right? The aggressor, and then playing the role of a victim, and we're just going to see more of that coming from Chinese diplomats, from Chinese politicians, from their leaders.
So you personally, do you see the similarities? Do you think that they are striking or not?
Well, I think yes, in a way that you see, as you mentioned, both Imperial Japan and China today has expansionist ambitions. That's for sure, and we need to see China's, expansionist ambitions clearly today, because that's, the clear and present threat that's posed to Taiwan and to the world.
And what do you make, Raymond, of the revenge narrative that you talked about, this grievance, and also what's happening within China?
Actually, the biggest paradox is putting those expansionists in the 21st century, modern days. And those were irreconcilable. For example, after World War II, there's a rise of democratic peace theory. So the whole globe is developing toward making the rule-based international order very clearly and trying to make the empowerment in the citizens so that we have democratic countries, and democratic countries don't go to war with each other. So the Chinese reviving, resuscitating those old doctrines into today, which is the biggest irony. The second one, the Chinese is not doing not merely that. It's trying to be a revisionist power, trying to use their so-called irredentism to threaten their neighbors, but Taiwan is not the only target, that's the first target. For example, they resuscitate the doctrine of that Okinawa should be considered independent and not part of Japan, and the Senkaku Islands issues. So Japan will be immediately feel the threat. So because China is aiming at Japan, will not stop at Taiwan. And finally, the global economics, that the Chinese rise of Chinese militarism is so embedded into the global economy, and Chinese supported their militarism with the power of industrial and the trade status. So the issue is getting more complex today than previous ages.
Yeah, Gemon, that was a very good distinction between the two, isn't it? The integration of China now and its power, its economic power. Also, Imperial Japan didn't have a partner. Right. Yeah, whereas China, we see today, has, as we spoke about, Russia, a vassal state, but also being a nuclear power.
And oh, by the way, Japan's constitution really doesn't allow it to be an expansionist country, and that's why they call it the Japan Self-Defense Forces, not the Defense Department that China has. And the example of Okinawa, until 1971, that territory was controlled by the United States, and the United States gave it to Japan. It wasn't taken from China. So all these distortions of history is classic propaganda by the Communist Party.
I also want to play devil's advocate. There's some critics that may say that Donald Trump is concentrating power, that he is sort of silencing his critics, and obviously we all know that he's ordered a massive military buildup, peace through strength. So for those viewers or commentator, for the record, what is the difference?
Well, I don't think a 3% investment or 3.5% investment in GDP is a massive buildup. It is increasing every year, but the buildup of China is 7 and 7.5% every year. That's a big difference. And you compounding interest, who wins? It's not a good outcome. The Constitution of the United States prevents the president from getting too much power. The whole point of the Constitution was to prevent the president from becoming a king, or in Xi Jinping's position, a chairman of the Communist Party of China, which rules China. And the PLA is obligated to do whatever he says. In the United States, the military is obligated to the Constitution of the United States and does not have any kind of loyalty to the president.
Okay. Now, it's a theme we've covered since our very first show about China's coercion of Japan, and that's Allied support for Tokyo. Former Japanese Ambassador Yamagami Shingo, writing in The Australian again, is calling for more support from Canberra for Tokyo in the article, "Where is Australia in Japan's hour of need?" Yamagami ends with, "When Australia came under tremendous pressure from China and was subject to similar economic coercion, Japan stated out loud that Australia was not walking alone. Is it too much to expect the same from our Aussie mates in times of need?" Michael, so given what we just discussed, what are the dangers of countries like Australia, but we could also say, how about the UK, Canada, how about Italy, who is building this next generation fighter with Japan and the UK, putting trade relations with China ahead of standing with Japan?
Well, I think since Ambassador Yamagaki's article, the Australian Defence Minister, Richard Marles, went to Tokyo and did make a statement about the recent incidents, calling it deeply concerning what China has done with their military in the Okinawa waters. So I think Australia has stepped up. We can debate whether it's enough or to what extent. But I'll say also that Australia is feeling the pressure, too, of Chinese coercion. Australia is feeling the Chinese naval exercising in waters closer to Australia than ever before. So, they understand, or they should understand, that it's not Japan feeling the threat only, right? China is in every other neighborhood in the region, including Australia's front yard. And speaking of trade, right? Australia should also understand it better than anyone else, having been the victim of China's, trade punishment, as I mentioned earlier, just for calling for an investigation into the origins of COVID. So yes, it's very important that countries, not be too singularly focused on, let's have good trade relations with China, and disregard everything else, right?
Raymond, I mean, haven't we all been here before? I mean, I thought that what had happened was there was the realization that security trumps economy.
I think actually Japan is not standing alone. Of course, the support from U.S. has to a very, very substantial level. And also Japan's helping the ASEAN countries and with the coalition and coordinated action from Australia. So actually the allies building is still continuing, given no matter what happened in Washington. And I want to emphasize another recent development is speaking up from the ASEAN country, for example, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam, and about the point of solving this, staging down this and resolve this peacefully. And also Vietnam sent its naval ships to transit through Taiwan just now. And you see that, so of course we see back and forth from the different governments of the different countries, but taking as a whole, across all the allies, I think of course they are in different stages of awareness about threat, but overall they are progressing on building and strengthening their alliances.
It seems to be that Tokyo, they would like to have more louder, as the former ambassador said, support.
Yes.
You know, on the international stage, there has been silence. Other than perhaps Defense Minister Miles from these Western, for example, allies.
Sometimes it's containing a more sophisticated signals. For example, the signal about the Minister of Defense of Japan saying about the unprofessional maneuvering, being the radar lock on the Japanese jets. That will immediately remind everyone in this circle about the maneuvering against Australia, for example, about their reconnaissance jets in the South China Sea. Also about the laser, using the laser to target on the Coast Guard in the Philippines. So I think in those signals, I think not only about the volume of the diplomatic message, but a reminder of the common threats we face. That also contains the call for help or call for the need for the strengthening the alliance.
Gaemon, hasn't it all been drowned out by China's, you know, very shrill and aggressive, you know, wolf warrior-like statements? That appears to be the narrative that is carrying, or is that not the case?
Well, I think the little baby in the sandbox, which is China, is crying for getting some sand in between its toes. And every time something happens, they scream and yell and they make propaganda and they do things. And so what we saw was the escalatory actions by the Consul General in Osaka from China, attacking and mentioning that it would be good to behead the Prime Minister of Japan. Mm-hmm. You know, this is the wolf warrior part that you mentioned. Yeah. Okay, and so they have the diplomatic and the propaganda part, and then you have the military dimension coming into play. And so what happened was the U.S. met that military reaction and gave China an opportunity to de-escalate. Okay, but I think in the big picture of things, the fact that the U.S. did something when we all know that Trump is going to meet with Xi in April. So the assumption in China was that Trump wouldn't do anything until April. So because the United States did something, it doesn't work. But I think it's a big important thing to mention.
Mm. You talked about the U.S. met China's military aggression.
Right.
It didn't do it diplomatically. Are you saying that is because Trump does not want to throw off the rails this meeting with Xi Jinping? I mean,
okay,
what is he scared of?
I would mention the fact that the ambassador in Japan did attack China for what was said by the Consul General.
But nobody in Washington. There's been silence from Washington.
But again, the level, you have to understand the level, right? It's a Consul General of China in Osaka. You don't need to have the president respond to a Consul General.
But it's been a lot more than just share gens.
Right, what I'm saying is you have to also understand that if you start having the president speak, then who's above that? So that's
There's
escalation.
Marco Rubio. There's,
Right, you're right. There are
Pete
other.
Hegseth.
I'm just saying that the government of the United States, which I don't represent, decided to have the U.S. ambassador in Japan to respond to this event. Again, trying to calm down and meet the threat, but not escalate. But you don't have Xi Jinping saying anything about this.
No, but you have Wang Yi saying things. He's the foreign ministry.
Right.
The equivalent would be Marco Rubio.
Correct.
And it's all targeted at Takaichi. Raymond.
We're taking into consider about the political assessment that there were signs that China don't want to escalate it. For example, the minister of the Chinese foreign ministry, when they show a cold shoulder to the Japanese delegate, immediately the next day he traveled himself to Dalian to put a message to the Japanese business communities there. So the expectation is that Chinese itself, they themselves are trying to find a stepping down and de-escalate. But the things got mastered because of this naval maneuver. But naval maneuver, because it took time to prepare. So it might happen in the time of the diplomatic escalation. So I think the parties are waiting for the Chinese themselves to step down from this tension. So that might play a role into the so-called silence from the DC.
Okay, we'll have to wrap it up there. Thank you so much, Raymond Sung, Gemet Larari, and Michael Chen for joining Taiwan Talks today. If you liked our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching the shows today. Stay safe and see you next time.